Welcome to the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Sunday, October the 4th, 2020. On this episode of the Politicrat, media malpractice and the Trump virus. How the media on cable television in the corporate sphere is covering Trump getting coronavirus and what they are not doing that they must do. That coming up next. Welcome back. Before getting to the subject of media malpractice, I want to talk about a brand new t-shirt line that I have released and designed that you can buy right now. It's called the Politicrat Vote Early Color Collection t-shirt series. And you can look sharp, colorful, and send a great important message doing it. And that's with the Vote Early t-shirt that I have designed that is now available online. Right now they're in 3 different colors: purple and gold, or I should say purple and yellow logo, purple shirt, yellow logo, black with red, and red with black. It's got vote early on the front of it. That's the message you send to people who are still thinking, well, I'll wait till November 3rd, or well, I'll wait till later on in the month of October, or well, maybe I'll just kind of hang back here for a few weeks. No. You've got very little time left here in terms of voting, because this November 3rd date is going to be upon us in a flash. So why not do something that will help not just yourself, but everybody around you? You can walk down your street, and if it's still warm in your city, and I'm sure it is in many cities these days, given what we're dealing with the climate, you can send a really important message, and in a very colorful way, by wearing one of these Vote Early t-shirts that I have on sale online here at the-politicrat.myshopify.com. That's the place to go. You've got t-shirts for women. You've got unisex t-shirts. More colors will be coming as well. So don't worry if your favorite color is not there. There'll be some additions in the next few days. But my goodness me, now is the time to buy the Vote Early t-shirt from the Politicrat. You'll definitely get rave reviews wearing it, and you'll be doing a public service, encouraging people to vote early, which is what we all must do, especially with 30 voting days left. Vote early and purchase your t-shirt now at the Politicrat online store at the-politicrat.myshopify.com. Speaking of voting early, there are some states whom today have their voter registration deadlines, and I can think off the top of my head of 3 states: Alaska, Arkansas, and Tennessee, all of whom have their voter registration deadlines today, Sunday, October 4th. So for those of you who are listening and you are in those states, be sure to register to vote today, because this is the last day you have to register to vote in those states: Alaska, Arkansas, Tennessee. Now, there may be others, but those are the 3 that I can think of off the top of my head. And if you aren't sure about the voter registration deadline in your state, you can go to my online guide on Twitter. It's a pinned tweet at the popcorn REEL. And of course, you can also go to iwillvote.com. Either one of those will give you the voter registration deadline in your state. But for those of you who still have not registered to vote yet, I really want you to register to vote right now.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. I think it's fair to say we're going to remember this day for a long time. According to the new figures that were published by the COVID tracking folks who chart the statistics of the pandemic in this country, there are 50,000 new COVID cases today, 835 deaths from coronavirus. And tonight there are 30,000 plus people hospitalized with the coronavirus. And one of them, of course, is the President of the United States. This was the scene just 2 hours ago. The President of the United States in a mask walking out of the White House across the South Lawn to the Marine One helicopter, which transported him to Walter Reed Medical Center for treatment of his coronavirus infection. White House says he is expected to remain hospitalized for the next few days on the advice of doctors.
Now, Peter, the irony is, and again, as I say, and I'm going to say it every block of this show and every hour of television I do, we must hold two thoughts in our head at the same time. I hope the president wows us with his resilience, comes out showing nothing can take me, not even COVID, dealt with it in a fraction of the time as the average person. Beautiful. But also, this is absolutely a crystalline truth that his status right now, Peter, is proof positive that the message he's been putting out was the wrong one to put out.
So you just heard there from the two Chris's. Chris Hayes on Friday on his show All In, and Chris Cuomo last night on his show Cuomo Primetime. Both of them were sending messages, obviously, that were much more somber. Chris Hayes in particular, his show, which normally starts out with not even just attacks, but certainly just the kind of righteous indignation that you should expect and more of the media should be putting on Donald Trump, was remarkably somber on Friday. Some were surprised by that. As the show opened, as you heard it, the very cold open pretty much, and just directly straight to the topic of being, of reporting about Donald Trump in the hospital for coronavirus on Friday. Chris Cuomo was a little bit more critical, and I would not have expected that of him, but he was. And he said that, yes, while there is the obvious situation with Donald Trump and the mindfulness of that and being able to say that, you want him to recover, there is also the other part of that, having these two ideas in your head at the same time and saying, hey, look at all these people he's put in danger with his absolutely, I would call, destroyer tactics here. This guy knew that he was sick. And I dare say he knew he was sick, and I've said this before on this podcast, that he was sick prior to Thursday. There's no question about it. When early Friday morning came and the results were released, whether he had been positive before then or not, and before he tweeted that result out on early Friday morning, he knew that he was sick. He had to have known. He did not look good at the debates, as I've said before. That debate on Tuesday, he looked horrible in, he looked haggard and everything else. I've said that before. But what my contention is right now is with the corporate news media on cable. The generally poor job that they have done in covering this. And I'm not talking about covering the actual event and the actual situation of news with Donald Trump. I am talking about the way that they have talked about Donald Trump in terms of rallying around him. That's not the media's job. The corporate news media's job is not to rally around Donald Trump, especially in an election year. What the corporate news media has to do instead is provide the kind of neutral coverage that is expected for anybody in this position who is high profile. What my complaint with the corporate news media, on cable in particular, is the way they have spoken around Donald Trump. And the job of the news media is not to my issue is where the media has done what I have heard and what maybe you heard in those clips, at least certainly around Chris Cuomo. Chris Cuomo, on at least 3 or 4 different occasions, and you heard, I think, 2 or 3 of them there in those clips, openly was saying, well, we wish, the most important thing is to wish Donald Trump well, and I wish him very well, and it's important that we as people in this country wish him well as Americans. If he didn't say that verbatim, there's certainly other hosts who have, and I've heard them with my own ears, and I should have been able to collect those clips together. Obviously, people, if they're human, do not want to see people in predicaments like this. But there are people in the world who I think would not mind seeing someone like Donald Trump in this predicament and worse. And while that is not the subject of this particular conversation today, what is the subject is media responsibility. And I get it. Granted, there are these opinion journalist shows like Chris Hayes' All In show on MSNBC, like Chris Cuomo's Cuomo Prime Time show on CNN. So they will give opinions. But to openly say, well, we wish him well and repeat that, I'm going to repeat it on every block of this show tonight. Oh, we wish him well. Listen, if you wish him well, you wish him well. And okay. But to keep repeating that every block on your program? Really? This is something that is not the way the media should be behaving. The media and the corporate news media on cable television should not be that invested here. Since when do you see people in the corporate news media on cable wish the families of those who are still battling coronavirus in this country, the some 7.5 million or so? Since when do you hear people in the corporate news media who are anchoring these programs wishing those people well? Those unnamed 7.5 million people. Now, I get that Donald Trump is in the White House. I get that. But I do think there is something a little unseemly, even with opinion journalists continuing to repeatedly talk about, well, we wish him well, we wish him well. There have been so many other people in this country, including lots of politicians, including Republicans, who have come down with this virus, and they are not repeatedly showered with, we wish you well. Now, some of you listening might think that I am nitpicking here. Some of you listening may think, oh, well, you're being really cruel. The guy is a coronavirus patient. Donald Trump is reckless and dangerous. Donald Trump lied to every single one of us and continues to lie to every single one of us. Donald Trump is responsible for murder and for the murder of 210,000 people. I guess I don't have it, as I said a couple of episodes back. I guess I do not have it in me to be so enthusiastic about the well-being of someone who has killed 210,000 people in an act of genocide. Someone who has lied to us about how severe this virus was, telling us all it would go away in a few days when April came, while he was telling Bob Woodward that this thing is very serious, man. Ooh. Oh, and it's not just the old getting it, it's the younger people too. If you're the wrong kind of person, forget about it. You're a goner. Ooh, this is the plague, Bob. The guy who took out ads on the Innocent 5 in Central Park spent something around the order of $85,000 at the time, which now in today's money would be well over $100,000 to put ads in newspapers about bring back the death penalty for 5 innocent young boys who killed an Iranian general at the beginning of this year, when that general was posing no imminent or direct threat to the United States. Doesn't matter what he did before. No one went after him before, at least not militarily, to the best of my knowledge. But the general that he killed, that's General Soleimani, no matter how he was or who he was or how he may have been doing things in the past, was not an imminent threat to the United States. Donald Trump killed him at the beginning of this year. The vast majority of people have forgotten that. Donald Trump is a walking block of evil. And I cannot bring myself to wish him well. Now look, I am certainly not someone who's going to say that he should no longer be on the planet. That's not me. That's not my province. That is not the way I roll. There are people on social media who certainly are not shy about conveying something quite contrary to that. But I am not going to get on television every few minutes and remind everybody that we should all wish him well. I mean, you have the pundits, that's the pundits' job, and the pundits are doing that. Pundits or other guests are the ones to express those kinds of sentiments, but not the host of your show. And I think that the host of the show should stay out of that, quite frankly. Now, if the host of the show decides to make one reference to it, then fine. I guess I don't have that much of a quibble with that. But what I do have a problem with is this repeated comment, well, we wish him well, we wish him well. I mean, that is not done for everybody else. Certainly not the 210,000 people who died. Certainly not the 7 million plus people who are struggling with this virus right now. I think that the real problem I have is this sudden, complete loss of perspective and focus in the corporate cable news media. And I'll explain what that is and what I'm talking about next. Welcome back. So what I object to, I think, mostly in what the media on cable, at least, is doing in the United States is covering this story on Donald Trump, but not pulling back from their microphones, or I should say from their microscopic positions, from their, I think, myopia in a way. I have likened the cable news media in the corporate world to covering something way up close, so close up to it that you really can't see it. because it's so close in your face. The camera has zoomed in to the focal point that is so tight to your face that you do not get any other perspective. And what the media on cable generally does not do is pull back the camera and pull back the shot to a wide shot where you can see everything around the thing that the camera and the media has honed in on and zoomed in on and focused in on. And once again, surprise, surprise, that happened and has been happening with this particular story on Donald Trump. What the cable news media now is doing is focusing on, one, the recovery, which, look, I think they should be doing that. I have got no quibble or problem with the corporate news media focusing on the recovery and focusing on him getting better, focusing on what the press conference did, that shambolic, whatever, that wasn't even a press conference, that was a stunt yesterday with Dr. Sean Conley and all of that, fine. And also focusing on the other people that I think that Donald Trump infected at that event last Saturday, the 26th, 2 Saturdays ago now. But to focus on that super spreader, as they call it, I hate that term, but to focus on that event from Saturday the 26th, and certainly that was an event where there were probably 200 to 300 people crammed into that small area. To focus only on that, but skip over the debate portion of this, I think is definitely malpractice by the news media. I do not understand how you can talk about the event that happened in the Rose Garden on Saturday, the 26th of September of this year, and somehow skip 3 days later at the debate on Tuesday, the 29th. And not only skip over that, but not even talk about the fact that you've put another obvious person in danger at that debate. And that person is Joe Biden, the vice president of this country, at least at one time he was. And a man who is 77 years old. There is very, very, very little mention of that aspect of this whole story. They mention it in passing, but they don't go into any real detail about that. They're talking all about these Republican politicians and this one's infected and that one's infected, and they are. I mean, they should be talking about it. I am not saying they shouldn't. Kellyanne Conway's infected. You've got 3 Republican U.S. senators, Ron Johnson, Tom Tillis, Mike Lee, all of them infected. You've got a close advisor and assistant to Donald Trump, Nicholas Luna, infected. Chris Christie drove himself to hospital because he's infected. You've got these at least 3 White House press journalists who have been infected, and you've got the Reverend, the president of Notre Dame University, he's infected. And the list goes on and on and on and on and on and on. And there will be more. Make no mistake, there will be more people. And I understand the media should be focusing on those things. But can you also talk about Joe Biden, who was less than 15 feet, 10 feet away on the debate stage? Because that may have been when Donald Trump was most infectious. And I don't mean in any kind of good way. I mean in a toxic way, like I normally mean it when I'm talking about Donald Trump. At that debate, I believe, now I'm not a doctor, but I believe that is when he was shedding a heck of a lot of virus. Donald Trump, as I've said before, was haggard, tired, sweaty. He looked awful. And there's no way that anyone can tell me that he wasn't sick or he was not infectious during that debate. And I do think that since this is an election season and people are voting all over this country right now, probably up to 3 million people voting, that there needs to be further inventory conducted on that whole debate. Now, I get it. They talked about it last week, and the news cycle is ephemeral when it comes to the news media. But now that it's very clear that it would appear that this event last Saturday, the 26th, that is, was an event where multiple people got sick, were infected with this coronavirus. How can you skip over that event, skip over the debate that came 3 days later and get to where we are now? And the thing that really gets me is that in covering this, there are all these shots of Walter Reed, all these Trump supporters in the background. And I'm not saying that Trump supporters can't be there to support the guy that they like. That's not what I've got a problem with. It's the corporate news media doing their shot right in front of Walter Reed. You've got Trump supporters with their flags waving in the background of that shot. There is this free publicity, once again, is my point, that the corporate news media on cable in particular is doing, just like they did 4 years ago. And what is happening is that Donald Trump is getting all this free publicity once again, particularly right now, with 31, and in this case 30 days as of today, 30 days as of today, 30 voting days left. So even when he's not on the campaign trail, Donald Trump is getting wall-to-wall publicity. While Joe Biden, who, by the way, he's running in this presidential election, is getting next to no coverage at all. I watched quite a bit of the cable news media yesterday. And the vast majority of it was devoted to this one story of Donald Trump at Walter Reed. Again, I am not saying that you shouldn't be covering this. You should be covering it. But as you and I both know, the corporate cable news media and the corporate news media in general can only cover one thing at a time. They are deliberately incapable of giving credence to two news stories. They literally are as a dog with a bone, and a bone that's very tasty. They will never let go of that bone. They will gnaw and chew and gnaw and suck and gnaw at that bone, and they won't let that bone go. While they will ignore all manner of things around them, that bone, they're not going to let that bone go. And that is what you have with this coverage. Most of the coverage centers around, how crazy the press conference is. At least that's what it had been. Coverage of the press conference that was just a joke. But there was very little coverage at all about Donald Trump's behavior and how dangerous it was and is. Now, there are media people that are reminding you of what he said to Bob Woodward, and there are reporters, I think, who are doing an excellent job. I've mentioned them before. Certainly have on Twitter at the Popcorn REEL. Caitlin Collins of CNN has been particularly good. I think that Yamiche has been excellent, and Paula Reed of CBS, and Weijia Zhang of CBS as well, among others. But those are the ones who I think have done a very good job. Jeremy Diamond has done well, I think, on CNN as well. But these really are the only people, and a few others, who are really doing the job. They are reporters. Now, it's a different thing for them. But it's these anchors and the people who are having these discussions around a table that have not done their jobs properly. Joe Biden had at least one or two events yesterday on the campaign trail, and they barely got coverage. It took Michael Holmes of CNN late last night from the CNN International desk to actually have any video of either Kamala Harris or Joe Biden doing campaign events. Joe Biden did one yesterday for a union. I think it was the transit union, and they played a clip from that event. And Kamala Harris was already in Salt Lake City in Utah. She's already there now. And she was being given a tour of something or other. I forget what it was. Why didn't we see that video during the day? And the video that was shown was literally about 10 seconds, if that. Why weren't we seeing any of that video during the day to break up the monotonous coverage? You know, the zoom in, magnifying glass, microscope coverage on this one event, this one story that you're not going to let go. The dog gnawing and sucking on the bone, chewing on the bone. I think that there is some malpractice there when you are not even covering the other candidate at all, and particularly in election season. Now, I get it. There is no fairness doctrine anymore. Reagan got rid of that in 1987 through the FCC. And these kinds of things that were scrapped are the reason why you don't have this fair time or equal time or anything like that. But I have to tell you, some of this coverage is akin to a campaign rally for Donald Trump. CNN played his 4-minute video on one show. Then they played it again in chunks on Chris Cuomo's show. Then they played it on another show before that. They keep playing it. Now, look, I know it's newsworthy. I get it. But it is that republication and republication and republication that continues to help Donald Trump in that way. It doesn't help the country, because I think the country is going to do the right thing. And I think they're doing the right thing in droves right now by voting early and voting out this criminal administration. But what the issue for me is, and it's very clear, is that the corporate news media, on cable in particular, is not looking at the fact that not only did Donald Trump put the lives of these Republicans and everybody in that Rose Garden ceremony in danger, because I certainly think that he's the one that spread this darn thing. I don't have all the medical evidence, and I don't have any of it. That's just my uninformed opinion. But I think Donald Trump also, wouldn't you say, put the life of Joe Biden, Jill Biden, and the entire Biden team in danger as well. At that debate, just 3 days later, he didn't look well. He didn't sound good. He was sweaty. He interrupted Joe Biden 128 times, according to Democracy Now! And thank goodness Joe Biden and Jill Biden have tested negative for coronavirus, and he is repeatedly being tested, as is, I suspect, Jill Biden as well. He is going to be tested on every campaign trip that he does, after every campaign trip, which I think is a very good idea. There was a time a month or two ago where he wasn't being tested at all, according to published reports. But they're certainly stepping up that routine now. Joe Biden will be in South Florida on Monday. That's tomorrow. Among other campaign stops this week, he will also be in Arizona. That's coming up this Thursday. And Kamala Harris, his running mate, will appear with him. And it will have been the first event where both of them have appeared together. Before large audiences, or before a crowd, or before a public event, since the convention. Now, there may have been some events where they appeared together, signing something, but that was really for the press. But this will be the first major campaign event they have done together since the convention. That's coming up this Thursday. And they will appear together in Arizona. And that, I think, will be a good thing for Joe Biden and the Biden campaign, to have both Biden and Harris together in the same place. I cannot dream of the idea. I cannot imagine that Joe Biden, if the shoe were on the other foot, would be covered so extensively. Now, he probably would, but I guarantee you the media would also focus on the exposure, or the potential exposure, to Donald Trump if the shoe were on the other foot. But I do think there is a level of irresponsibility and a level of, again, this free publicity. Donald Trump got $5 billion worth of it, free airtime, in 2015 and 16. And now he's getting that same airtime again now, even from his hospital bed. I mean, this is a campaign of orchestration. There were reports on Twitter last night from journalists that the photographs that the White House were releasing of Donald Trump at a desk signing something was really him there signing something that was blank. It was just him signing his name on a blank piece of paper. And there was some zoomed in close-up shots, speaking of covering a story with a microscope or a magnifying glass, and you're focusing in on the thing that is up close to your face. When you looked at that photograph, it was a blank piece of paper he was signing. This is all a stunt. Not him getting the virus because he has the virus, and that's not a stunt. But the way that the White House and Donald Trump himself are orchestrating and steering the publicity with this phony news conference, whatever that was, the 12-minute debacle yesterday with that Dr. Connolly. You have all these Trump flags outside Walter Reed. They're waving these flags around like it's a campaign rally. The inconsistency of the timeline. The fact that the First Lady somehow is, she's doing okay. I guess you can see how some of the conspiracy theorists out there are thinking, well, wait a minute now. What the hell's going on here? I don't think that Donald Trump didn't get this virus. I think he did. Obviously, this guy got this virus. What my issue is the number of people he's put in danger. What my issue is is that over 210,000 people have died because of his willfulness and his sociopathic and psychopathic ways. Donald Trump has committed crimes against humanity here. That is what the focus should be. I know the corporate news cable media, they're never going to touch that. They are never going to look at that. They're never going to even explore that. They don't even have to say what I say about what I think he's clearly done. Committed crimes against humanity here. And there was one other person, Dr. Jonathan Reiner on CNN, who actually said the same thing, except he said that these are crimes against American humanity. Well, I'll leave out the American part because all the people who have died in this country were not Americans. They lived here. But I don't think this should be prefaced by it being American or British or African or anything else. These are people, regardless of which country they're from or which country they live in. We have over 1 million people globally who've died from this virus, and that is a conservative estimate. Over 7 million people right now in this country, 7.5 million, are dealing with this virus every day. No one's talking about Tulsa. I know CNN did a brief thing on this yesterday, but nobody in the media is talking about Tulsa, all these events that he's done. Herman Cain died from this virus. John Prine, the country music folk legend, died from this virus. Folk rock legend John Prine. Ellis Marsalis died from this virus. There is an Irish playwright who died from this virus. So many other people, famous and not famous. CNN did do something good a couple of weeks ago when Anderson Cooper was letting the crawl throughout his show of all the names of people, unnamed, well, untold hundreds, well, their names were there, but all the names of these people were scrolling. And that needs to be brought back again on all of these networks, not just on CNN, but all these networks should take that lead. And if you're in the corporate news media and you happen to be listening to this, make sure that you open your lens and expand it so that it's not just about one person. I know, yes, he's in the White House and he should be covered. I'm not saying don't cover him. But what I am saying is, can you pull your camera back and give us a wide shot so we can see the perspective and the totality of what this virus does to people, but what Donald Trump has done to people and the lives that he has ended? You're going to hear more people coming down with this virus. And at the end of the day, the blame for that lies solely with Donald J. Trump. Welcome back. I think that the bottom line is that the corporate news media has often done this with events. And I think there's something disturbing about it, that there is no sense of analyzing the big picture. And what we always seem to see is that when some big event happens, the media just drops everything. They drop all perspective, all focus on what's going on, and just drop everything and focus on this one thing and focus on it to death. I'm going to take a couple of examples of this. Back in 2001, understandably, the events of September 11th of that year caused everybody to drop everything in the corporate news media and focus on, obviously, the understandable danger and destruction and people who had lost their lives on a very frightening event that happened in this country. Understood. Prior to that, there was criticism of George W. Bush and his ineffectiveness in his first 8 months in the job. Prior to that, there was an incident with China, the spy plane incident. I mean, people forget what things were what was happening in the world and in the presidency of George W. Bush in the run-up to September 11, 2001. He was having a lot of trouble getting legislation passed on the part of his party. There were all kinds of things going on. He had taken a lot of vacation time in those opening few months of his presidency. I mean, people forget all of this now, but that is what happened. And of course, 9/11 happened, and that, for a lack of a better word and for much of a crude word, rejuvenated his presidency. It gave him a mission. And that was exactly what he got. He became this so-called war president, started 2 wars, certainly the one of which was one that should never have ever began in the first place. And one that is, look, it's war criminal status for him. But it's so interesting now that George W. Bush, in many circles these days, is somewhat beloved, even by some of the people who may not have liked him when he was in the White House. And that's only because of who's in the White House right now, I think. And while there were actually some decent things that W did, re-signing the Voting Rights Act, and also doing really important AIDS initiative, HIV initiative work for people on the African continent, somebody who was a friend to the African continent in many respects, made several visits there. His presidency was a disaster. And his foreign policy was one of the things that made him so unpopular. But on September 11th, the media dropped all the focuses on how Bush had been prior to that time, and understandably in some way focused on it. You had these media people on anchor desks talking about, well, we should rally around the flag and maybe everybody should put American flags in their windows. And I thought that kind of comment was unwarranted from a news anchor. Let some pundit do that. Let some guest do that. But to have an anchor on a New York local station talking about, well, maybe people should put flags in there, that's really jingoistic, and it's really chilling, because you are a journalist at an anchor desk. You are the anchor of a program. And I think that is a form of media malpractice. Now, your opinion on that might be very different from mine. My opinion on that might be very different from yours. But I do think there is something unseemly, even after an event like that happening to this country, a horrible event, where almost 3,000 lives were taken by these terrorists, that a news anchor actually says, well, maybe people should put flags in their windows. And sure enough, everybody actually did that. I remember that well in New York. Nothing wrong with putting flags up that are representative of the United States. The USA flag, Old Glory, not the stars and bars, and not Trump flags. But that's what happened in 2001. You had an anchor on a local newscast say, well, maybe we should, or maybe it was a national newscast, but I was sitting there watching it. Well, maybe we should put up, people all across the country should be putting up their flags. That is a really unusual, at least as far as I'm concerned, unusual thing for a news anchor to say during a live television broadcast. I'm not even going to give that kind of thing the benefit of the doubt that someone got caught up in the moment. No. That's journalistic ethics 101. You never make yourself part of the story. You never get involved in the story. Obviously, you have your feelings around that story, and that's important, but those things are not to be reflected in the actual anchoring of your show, or even the reporting of your story, although it's difficult for reporters. I am not saying that it's not. And of course, the rules have changed somewhat, especially with what we've seen in the last few years. Journalists do become very emotionally invested in the stories they cover, and that's been true forever. Only now, in this world that we're living in, the 24/7 cable world, the social media world, that it never unplugs, you will get to see journalists have these emotions. Look at what happened during the summer when you had police firing at live rounds of rubber bullets at reporters who were doing their job on live television, and they get hit. There was a woman reporting in a news station, I think it was in South Carolina or North Carolina, and she was live at this event, I forget which city it was in, and some cop fired directly at her, hit her, and aimed at the cameraman or the camera woman. There's YouTube video of this. I've actually played it on this podcast episode. Well, not on this episode, but on this podcast way back, several months ago, during the summer. And of course, you're going to react to getting hit by rubber bullets. Ali Velshi, the MSNBC journalist and anchor, he got hit by rubber bullets live on air. And you have Donald Trump mocking him subsequently. But there is really something unseemly about things like this. Same thing with what happened with the Iraq War. All of these media people engaging in this malpractice, instead of being these detached, just the facts, ma'am, reporters or anchors, they became cheerleaders for the U.S. military. And I'm sorry, but that is not the way that the news media is supposed to function. It's just not. You even had people like Al Franken, who was still in the media at that point in 2003, and Keith Olbermann, who was still very much a news journalist, not the sports journalist that he is now or commentator that he is now. He was entrenched in the Countdown MSNBC world. And both of them, very, very early on, before they changed their minds, they would change their minds in a few weeks or months later. But at the very early outset and prior to this invasion, they were for it. Both Al Franken and Keith Olbermann were for this invasion before they weren't. I believe one of them wrote a column about why he supports it. I don't know why he supported it. I don't know if that column's still around. But both of them, a few weeks later or, in days into the war, changed their stances. Certainly they did before the casualties really mounted up. But it's that ability for the corporate news media to, in the blink of an eye, go from challenging the person they're covering or the war that they're, or the covering something, challenging that person to, if something happens, they completely drop it all of a sudden. They do not ever refer to it again. It is as if nothing of those previous events even happened, much less registered to the American public. And that to me is really scary. That God forbid, if there were some kind of disaster to happen, that the corporate news media would completely lose all perspective and focus on that bone that dog is gnawing on forever and ever and ever, and will never go back to covering the other things that same individual did. When you think about it, RBG, who passed away just over 2 weeks ago now, the media did something that was very unseemly, I thought, as did the Republicans. And that was focus on the politics that night, that she had passed away, that Friday evening, within an hour, there were news networks like MSNBC and CNN that were focusing on, well, what's the fallout now? Ooh, the Supreme Court. And in that early aftermath of her passing, there was more focus on, well, what's the political fallout of this, Johnny, than there was really about her life. Now, granted, there were people who were on there who talked about her life. And later on, hours later, they did these documentaries on MSNBC. They had a documentary on her, and then CNN, I think they did. But that was not before. There were several hours of people commenting on her passing on the immediate level of that. And on, oh, what's Mitch McConnell doing? Oh, that's what the whole initial coverage was of her passing. They completely obliterated her by not really talking about her and her life. I mean, they did talk about her, but you know what I'm saying. In some ways, in the media broadcast coverage, in many ways in cable, RBG, the Supreme Court Justice, did not get her proper due. I don't really think she did. And she did so much for this country. And to see now that the corporate news media is lathering and frothing over someone who came down with this virus, the very someone that they spend days and days getting on top of, oh Jesus, wrong choice of words. But the same person that they rightfully attack and skewer, all of a sudden, this and that, and, the doctors, and not that you shouldn't cover it, but that's the only thing they're covering. But with RBG, it was, who's going to replace her on the Supreme Court? That was the topic. That was more the topic than her life was in those first few hours of coverage on that Friday night. And that's the issue. That's the malpractice that I am referring to as well in the news media, especially on cable TV. Do you see what I'm saying? You focus exclusively on this guy and his health. The rest of what he's done, be damned, including putting a 77-year-old man and Jill Biden as well in risk, at great risk. And Chris Wallace, the moderator, and all these other people in that room at risk. And his crew isn't wearing any damn masks. And you're focused on his condition. And he's getting world-class care, by the way. But when RBG passes away, it's all about, well, what's the play of the Republicans? Is Mitch McConnell gonna, is he gonna put someone on the court? And how soon will he do it? Oh, yes, he's just sent out a statement that he's gonna be putting someone on the Supreme Court. He intends to do that before the election. Do you see the difference? And the common denominator in both of those examples is that the corporate news media, on cable in particular, is completely shilling for the Republicans and doing it at the expense of someone as brilliant and as important to American history as Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It's really disgusting. And Chris Cuomo says, as you heard earlier, that I'm going to mention in every block of this show, of my show tonight, how important it is that we wish Donald Trump well. Didn't do that, did he, with RBG? Did you hear him and every block of his show then talking about, well, may she rest in peace? We wish her family all the very best in these difficult times. I'm going to mention that on every block of my show, that I'm going to wish the family of RBG the very best, and my sincere condolences to them, and my best to them in these very difficult times. And I'm going to mention that on every block of my show. No, you didn't hear that, because he didn't say it. Nobody did. People get played. Do you see how people get played? Do you see how the corporate news media does that? It's subtle for some of us, but it's clear for a lot of us. This is what they do. One event happens and they lose their lunch. That's the problem. That's the malpractice that I'm talking about. This clown is getting all this coverage. And quite frankly, it would be a different story, in my view, if he had a stroke, if he had a heart attack, if there had been some kind of attempt on his life, God forbid. I could understand the corporate news media doing the kinds of stories that they are doing on him. But as deadly and as dangerous as this virus is, and even when he's considered, and he certainly is, in a risk group, to be having this level of coverage, even on him, I think is a disgrace. Honestly, he's putting out videos. And you can talk about, well, was the video done on this day or that day, or 2 minutes ago, or 10 weeks ago, or... But this guy apparently certainly wants to project to you and I that he is doing well. He may not be, because whenever he says something, bet the other way, and you can bet that he's lying. He's told over 23,000 lies already in these last 3.5 years. But this guy is clearly able to sit in front of a camera and preen and sign things, and he wants to project this image, right, that he's really doing well. But the media is completely being his messenger, as they are and as they have been for 40 years. They were his messenger in 2015 and 16. They've been his messenger for 40 plus years. Just ask people in New York about that. The Donald. The media has always loved Donald Trump. Let's get that straight. And here's the proof.
Man, who would have expected the ride we're all having right now? This is pretty amazing, and, who would have thought that this circus would come to town? But, it may not be good for America, but it's damn good for CBS. That's all I got to say. So, what can I say? It's, the money's rolling in, and polls are open. This is fun. We had a debate a couple of weeks ago with 14 million people on a Saturday night. It's amazing. That's all I can say.
Do you look at the Trump phenomenon as impacting ad spend? Because while he's got lots of money, he's got a lot of free media as well.
Yeah, he's getting a lot of free media, but all that's happening out there's a lot of money in the marketplace. There's a lot of money in the marketplace, and sure, is Donald, they're not even talking about issues. They're throwing bombs at each other, and I think the advertising reflects that. Most of the ads are not about issues. They're sort of like the debates. They're saying he did this or he did that. It doesn't say what I stand for. It's, it is, I've never seen anything like this, and, this is going to be a very good year for us. Sorry, it's a terrible thing to say, but bring it on, Donald. Go ahead. Keep going. Don't write. Somebody, I said that at another investor conference, and the next day some blog put out, Moonvest supporting Trump wholeheartedly. I said, no. I'm not taking it aside. I'm just saying, for us, economically, Donald's place in this election is a good thing.
CBS is ahead of John Trump.
Exactly.
That's what you're saying. Got it.
Yep. Les Moonves now the disgraced ex-CEO of CBS. I mean, right from the horse's mouth. When Joe Biden wins, and if he wins, and I think he will win and win big, and you have to get out there and vote to make that happen, tell your friends to. Much of the corporate news media will absolutely have no idea what to do with itself. Believe me, these folks love the chaos, though, as quiet as it may be kept in some circles. Not Les Moonves quiet, because that kind of quiet is a signal the other way. It may not be good for America, but it's damn good for the bottom line of CBS. They love this chaos. They love this stuff. And I can send as many tweets as I do to these folks at these networks. But the reality is that this is their cash cow. This is their model. And so they're not going to talk about Joe Biden. They're not going to talk about the issues that affect us. They're not going to talk about the campaign issues. They're going to luxuriate over Twitter videos, 4 minutes long and otherwise, of a decrepit orange thug who is getting the world's best medical care, issues on Friday notwithstanding. And they're going to completely give all this campaign airtime to a guy who's in a hospital bed at Walter Reed. There is something about the way the media does this. On a dime they turn like this. And it proves that the interests that they have are based in the money that they have and acquire through advertising. The corporate news media on cable and all these media networks in the corporate sphere started looking at news for profit in the 90s or thereabouts. Before then, news was not profitable. In fact, news still isn't profitable. News has become a money-making business, a money-making entity, but it's not profitable. I would definitely take issue with someone who says that the news is profitable, because it really isn't. But it's certainly something that you can make a little bit of money on. I guess that kind of sounds like a contradiction, but it really isn't when you really think about it. I should say that news is an investment business now. I think that's probably more accurate. But the news media has really serious responsibilities. And now that we are 30 voting days away from November 3rd, the media must make it very clear that when Donald Trump on November 3rd starts screaming and shouting about himself being the winner, when there's still at least 75 to 80% of the vote to be counted, that the media itself stands firm, makes it very clear that there is no winner of this presidential election, and there won't be until every vote is counted, and it's going to take several days, if not a week or two, before we find out who won. That is what every news media entity worth anything at all, with any kind of integrity, good luck finding that, must say on election night. Unless, of course, it is clear already that Joe Biden is on his way to a landslide, which is why it's important to vote early and do so right now. Because if there is evidence based on Florida who counts their votes right away and will have a result on election night, don't forget that. Florida has their results early, or on election night, I should say, but early in the night or by the end of the night, their results are in. And if the results in Florida show a Joe Biden victory, that, I'm telling you right now, folks, will mean Joe Biden is going to be president. And not only is he going to be president, he is going to have won this electoral college in a landslide. The two states to look at on November 3rd will not be Pennsylvania, actually. Will not even be Wisconsin, actually. But will be Florida and Ohio. And if Florida and Ohio are Joe Biden victories, you can turn off your television. Joe Biden will win in a landslide. And quite frankly, I think he still will. But we have 30 voting days. And I can talk about media malpractice until I literally am blue in the face. But what you have to do right now is get your friends to register to vote. I talked about this earlier. Alaska and Arkansas and Tennessee are among the states whose voter registration deadlines are today, October 4th, a Sunday. Make sure that if you're in any of those states, that you are registered to vote. Make sure you tell your friends to. Make sure everyone around the country, check your voter registration. I have a whole voter guide about this, where there are links to checking your voter registration, links to registering to vote, and so much more that you will find to be of great help and benefit to you. Get out there, get your friends and family to vote, and do so early. Phone bank, text, volunteer in general, be a poll worker. I think one thing that I can say about Donald Trump being sick with this virus is at least you won't have to worry for at least 2 weeks about him going around lying about how the voting process is supposedly rigged. You won't be hearing that from him. At least on that score, he will be silent. Let the voters continue to vote. And we don't need Greg Abbott in Texas telling predominantly black and brown communities that you've only got one drop box in your county. That is voter suppression. We don't need the shenanigans in the Pennsylvania state legislature either. We're going to put together a voting commission that looks to see if the vote is proper. We don't need that garbage, that voter suppression garbage. But what we do need is you to override voter suppression by turning out in droves with the largest turnout, the most massive turnout in American history. You have to turn out massive as voters in droves. And I think you're beginning to see that across the country. Vote early. You can get one of my t-shirts that I designed on the online store of the Politicrat, the official online store, the color collection, the Vote Early color collection from the Politicrat. You can go to the store at the-politicrat.myshopify.com. I think you'll like what you see. And the message there is clear. So check out the store and get your t-shirt today. Get your Vote Early t-shirt today. Thank you for listening to this edition of The Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore.